welcome back, Minifans. So to start today's episode, just wanted to clarify a few things. My intro episode, I probably did a poor job of providing some background information on myself. I do hold a degree in molecular microbiology. That is where my interests in bacteria, viruses, all those nasty little organisms, that's where it stems from. But I actually work as an ICU nurse. I work in a medical intensive care unit. This is a place where we often see a variety of these pathogenic microorganisms and just how deadly they can actually be if they're not properly diagnosed or treated. I've been in the healthcare field for almost 20 years now, working as a nursing assistant to begin with, and then as a registered nurse. I've worked with all kinds of patient populations, from orthopedics to cardiac units, with most of my ICU experience in treating burns and then medical problems in the medical ICU that I work in now. These problems range anywhere from respiratory illness to infections to organ failure and cardiac arrest. So there's a little bit of background on me. So now let's get to today's topic. Today, we're going to be discussing an organism that has been featured in the news recently due to the remarkable increase in cases over the past few years. Today's topic is syphilis. Recently, a report came out of Houston, Texas. They said that they've seen a 128% increase in the cases of syphilis over the past few years. This started in 2021. So this got me thinking. Didn't Blind Mike visit Houston in 2021 for Skankfest? Is this where the start of this series of outbreaks began, was with a visit from Blind Mike? I know that Mike has explained his blindness in the past, but I should mention that ocular syphilis may lead to a decrease in visual acuity, including permanent blindness. Ocular syphilis can be associated with neurosyphilis. Both ocular syphilis and neurosyphilis can occur at any stage in syphilis, including the primary and secondary syphilis stages. Is this the true case of Mike's blindness? Has he really been telling us the truth? Furthermore, if Mike is the reason for the increase in syphilis cases from his visit to Skankfest, when and where did Mike get it from? If we do some exploring, there are a couple of different avenues that could have caused this spread, and perhaps may lead to patient zero in what started this exponential rise in cases of syphilis in Texas. We're all well aware of how incestual the Geary family is. Mama Geary, with her open arms and apparently open legs when it comes to Mike, may have been the start of this syphilis outbreak. It would make a little sense. Or could Mike have received this bacterial gift from Alba? And if so, where did Alba get syphilis from? Perhaps a certain individual who has very prominent areolas could be patient zero. Oh, nipples, if you're listening, you may want to get tested ASAP. Now, these are just theories. Granted, most likely not the case for the rise in syphilis, but certainly worth looking at when trying to figure out where and when this nasty STD became a public concern and started a public health crisis in the Lone Star State. Now, of course, I'm joking. Mike, I love you. In fact, I happen to be a card-carrying gearhead, and I don't think he's the cause for the syphilitic spread. Nipples, on the other hand, maybe. Anyway, the following is just a little rundown on syphilis. I know, it's a little bit nerdy, a little bit boring, but maybe you'll learn something, especially some of you Minifans who may be paying for sex on a regular basis and not expecting to get a nasty little surprise after doing so. So, without further ado, here's a little presentation on syphilis. So we'll start with just a quick rundown on the actual bacteria itself that causes syphilis. So the bacteria is actually named Treponema pallidum. This is what causes venereal syphilis. It's pretty highly invasive, which is why it spreads quickly and relatively soon after infection. This is in part just due to the ability to evade the host's immune system, and this is due to its unique structure of the outer membrane of the bacteria itself. Syphilis is transmitted by sexual contact, obviously. Humans are the only source of syphilis, and there are no known non-human reservoirs. So if you're into bestiality, you don't have to worry about getting syphilis. Syphilis presents in 3 different stages. So patients who get this venereal syphilis, the primary stage will actually present as a genital tract lesion. This happens after about anywhere from 10 days to 2 weeks, but up to 90 days. At this point, the bacteria is actually multiplying pretty quickly at the point of entry, and this causes redness and swelling, producing those lesions. A lot of bacteria are present. This is a highly contagious stage as well. So if you're, still having sex while you have these nasty lesions. Probably painful, but you're also going to be spreading syphilis like nobody's business. But after about 2 to 6 weeks of symptoms, this primary lesion heals, and you only have remnants of scar tissue there. The secondary stage of syphilis happens at about 2 to 24 weeks. So the secondary or disseminated stage starts. Bacteria starts to multiply again, but this time it's in a lot of different tissues within the body. This produces a lot of other symptoms as well. You may have a slight fever, enlarged lymph nodes, overall feeling of malaise, and a rash. This rash is actually pretty typical of syphilis. It appears on the palms of the hands and the soles of the feet, and then will spread to other areas. So when diagnosing syphilis, and you have a rash, that's kind of one of the things that we'll look for. You'll get superficial sores on the mouth, the vagina if you have one, the anus. You may also find wart-like lesions that appear in kind of moist folds. Yeah. All these lesions still have a lot of bacteria. These are still highly contagious, and this may also lead to kidney failure if it's really, really bad. So about 2 to 6 weeks after the onset of the secondary syphilis, your body starts to actually bring about healing. It's finally able to recognize the bacteria is there and starts to eradicate it. But in about 25% of untreated patients, you will have recurrences of secondary stages of syphilis after the first several years following infection. So syphilis hangs around, especially if you don't get it treated. That's kind of one of the things where if you don't get it treated initially, it does go away. You may not even recognize that it's there, but it sits there in hiding, waiting to come back and just give you, multiple episodes in the future.
Do you ever have deja vu, Mrs. Lancaster?
I don't think so, but I could check with the kitchen.
So the third stage, tertiary syphilis, and this is actually what they call latency. So this can last for a very long time. In about 1/3 of untreated individuals, after a really prolonged period, some cases 20 to 30 years, the tertiary case actually starts to evolve. And this is where it becomes very, very dangerous, as it can actually be involved in cardiac and neurological systems. About 80% of fatalities from syphilis are actually caused by cardiovascular involvement, and almost the remaining 20% are all from neurological involvement of syphilis. The cardiovascular problems, they're typically aneurysms and coronary artery stenosis, leading to some kind of a heart attack or just a complete heart failure. And then the neurological syphilis can actually involve the brain or spinal cord. Other complications from this neurosyphilis are dementia, strokes, and as I mentioned earlier, blindness. It's also important to mention that infection during pregnancy, if you have syphilis, can lead to congenital syphilis, which may actually result in fetal death and birth defects, which is one of the leading causes of death in syphilis in children. So what if you think you have syphilis? Let's talk about diagnosing it, right? So it can actually be really difficult to diagnose, especially in its initial stages, because a lot of the first symptoms you see mimic a lot of other things. That's why syphilis is actually called the great imitator. But if you have genital lesions as well as these symptoms, definitely better get checked out by your PCP. You can also have enlarged lymph nodes, that malaise and rash. These are all these things that you'd see. But as I said earlier, too, that rash where you see it on the palms and the soles of the feet, those can kind of be like definite indicators of syphilis. So definitely see your healthcare provider. I do want to say that I am not a physician, so I'm not giving medical advice. But what I would say is recommending to see your healthcare provider if you have any of these signs or symptoms is probably a good idea. So who does syphilis affect most, right? This is where the Minifans should probably listen up. So infectivity rates correspond to the most sexually active age groups, right? This makes sense, yeah? So the highest being the 20 to 24-year-old age group. Now, I know that most Minifans have a hard time getting laid, especially you mincels, but this does fit their demographic. Furthermore, if you're paying for sex, which, let's be honest, guys, a lot of you are, right? A study from 2019 showed that from 32 different countries, about an average of 10.8% of sex workers tested positive for syphilis. So these sex workers included male, female, or transgender adults. So no matter your proclivities, if you're paying for sex, be aware that up to 10% of these sex workers may possibly have syphilis and be looking to give it to you. Especially for all of you Minifans looking to, pay for sex. And Cullinane, if you accidentally happen to go to another bachelor party and go back to another massage parlor, Yeah, make sure you're using the proper precautions when you're in
You
there.
want me to jerk you off?
From a historical perspective with syphilis, I want to talk a little bit just about the adoption of penicillin. So, in the 1940s, penicillin was really starting to be more readily used as an antibiotic. It was the first one that was widely used after its discovery. And we started to see syphilis kind of decrease until about 1958. After 1958, the trend had reversed and it's kind of steadily increased over the decades. Between 2017 and 2021, the cases of gonorrhea and syphilis have both increased in the US. Gonorrhea went up by 28%, and syphilis has gone up by almost 75%, and that's from the CDC. And then up to about 10% of people who actually have gonorrhea probably have a concurrent syphilis infection as well. So it's more and more likely that if you have one of these STDs that you may have another one hanging out with it. Thankfully, most of the treatments for gonorrhea will actually kill syphilis as well. Now, the CDC also estimates that about 20% of the U.S. population, which is 1 in 5 people, had an STD on any given day back in 2018, and that the cost of the health care for treating these people was about $16 billion just related to STDs. Furthermore, there is evidence that every year there are an additional 6 million new cases worldwide in people aged between 15 and 49.
This is bullshit. I want Bush. Pan down.
What's even more tragic is that over 300,000 fetal and neonatal deaths are attributed to syphilis, with 215,000 additional infants placed at increased risk of early death. So what about prevention? How can we prevent syphilis? So abstinence is the key way to prevent syphilis. Not a problem for a lot of you Minifans, right? Especially you in the Mincel world. Otherwise, the condom, still the gold standard for most people and method of choice for preventing sexual transmission, still works very well.
What do we need rubbers for?
If you think, oh, well, I'll put on like a topical antibiotic or some chemicals or creams or lotions, yeah, those don't work. There's no evidence to show that it works. Even washing thoroughly with soap and water or a long shower after sexual intercourse with somebody who has syphilis, that won't work either. Sorry, Cullinane. I know your love of hot showers, especially the extremely hot water soaking your engorged piece, but not going to help, especially if you've been with somebody who's had syphilis. So it's highly ineffective. What about a vaccine? There's no vaccine right now available for syphilis. It would be great if there was one, but there's just not enough interest at the moment. But there have been a few research projects done trying to at least start the first steps of creating a vaccine. So maybe in the future. So now you have syphilis. What are you going to do about it? All right. So treating syphilis, before there was antibiotics, the case fatality rate was about 10% within 40 years. So 10% of all people who got any kind of syphilis, they died within about 40 years. But now we have antibiotics, wonder drugs. So penicillin G is still the remaining drug of choice for treating syphilis. And what's nice is penicillin resistance hasn't yet emerged. There have been a lot of other bacteria that have gained drug resistance to a lot of the antibiotics we have. But thankfully, penicillin still works really well on treating syphilis. Not so good for gonorrhea. So gonorrhea, as I mentioned, these multi-drug resistant organisms, there's actually a new strain of gonorrhea here in Massachusetts. There have actually been a couple of cases of this, and these are the first in the United States. This strain, it's a novel strain of gonorrhea, and it's actually resistant and has reduced susceptibility to a lot of antibiotics used. So there are 2 cases here in Massachusetts. They were both actually eventually able to be treated, but it's really troubling, especially with the rise in STDs that we're seeing. If we start to see antibiotic-resistant strains, could definitely not be a good thing for public health or just for individuals, in general. So people, if you have a penicillin allergy, which there are quite a few people who do, you can actually take tetracycline for it. That'll kill it as well. So adults in developed countries where we are, we're pretty lucky because now, you rarely will die from syphilis. Undeveloped countries, what we might call third world countries, not so lucky. So, but here in the U.S. at least, even if you get the syphilis, you'll probably be all right so long as you get treated and tested for it. So that's syphilis. Nice little talk about this, stigmatic STD. There may be more STD talk in the future. We'll see. Maybe do some herpes or something later on. But to finish off, I thought maybe we'd take a quick look at some notable people who have actually had syphilis, died from syphilis, or even been rumored to have had syphilis.
Excellent!
So, famous painters. Henri de Toulouse-Lautrec, who is actually pretty famous for painting prostitutes. So, I wonder where he got the syphilis from. Paul Gauguin, as well as Edouard Monet, have also died from syphilis in the past. Classic authors Oscar Wilde and Guy de Maupassant and Charles Baudelaire died of syphilis. Al Capone notably died of syphilis. And then there's even rumors that Shakespeare, Abraham Lincoln, and Adolf Hitler all may have had syphilis. So just a few notable people there. Perhaps one day there'll be another name added to that list. Infamous podcaster and stand-up comic, Blind Mike Geary. I'm just kidding, Mike, of course. I don't think you have syphilis. I hope you don't have syphilis. I hope you're around for a while. Anyway, I want to thank everybody for listening. As always, comments, feedback, anybody looking to reach out, do a collaboration, I am at Make Me Sick Pod on Twitter. You can reach me at youmakemesickpod@gmail.com. Always looking for any kind of feedback or criticism, good or bad. I can take it. Let me have it. Hoping to do a collaboration in the future with the 420 guys. Give them a shout out. As well as possibly Dylan the Birdman. So they both reached out. So looking forward to doing something with both of them. Hopefully in the near future. But as I said before, thank you guys for listening. I do want to say before I leave, if this does interest you, pathogenic microorganisms, I do have a podcast that you can find on Apple Podcasts, on Amazon Music, on Spotify, RSS, under the same name, You Make Me Sick. So we do have a more comprehensive look at syphilis if you want to do that. Try not to bore you too much. Thought I'd spread a little bit of information, a little public health awareness here. Feel like I'm not doing my due diligence as a healthcare worker if I'm not at least trying to get the word out to prevent. So thanks again, and remember to always wash your hands, and if you're gonna be having sex with somebody you don't know, wrap your shit. Alright guys, take it easy. Talk to you next time.
What are you looking at, nerd? Huh?
I thought I was looking at my mother's old douchebag, but that's in Ohio.